Hello, welcome along to the Drop the Label podcast. Today I have the lovely Nikki Dodds with me, basically to discuss any labels that she feels quite strongly about or has identified with either now or in the past. Nikki, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Nikki, obviously. I joined RT Fitness nearly 2.5 years ago now. And weight is something that has dominated my whole adult life. Until this past year, I've been overweight my whole life. So I guess labels to do with weight and appearance are something that I do feel very strongly about and relate quite a lot to, I would say.
Okay. Is there any particular label? I mean, obviously you mentioned there about weight and how it's had quite a significant part in your life. Is there a particular label that stands out to you as one that, either has sort of been a massive part of who you are and what kind of decisions you've made?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was a rugby player for a lot of years, from sort of 18 to 30-ish. I was a rugby player, and the stereotypes that go with women's rugby, especially of the butch, aggressive people. That's not my personality, but I played rugby as a prop forward, which, again, if you were to Google stereotypes of prop forwards, they're the biggest people on the pitch, they're the biggest beer drinkers, that eat the most food. And, for me, that gave me an excuse to lead the lifestyle I did for a lot of years.
Because, I mean, obviously anyone listening to it won't be able to see obviously what I've got in front of me now. No. But anyone who watches the podcast via YouTube will be watching thinking, wait, she's not big. She doesn't look aggressive. So, I mean, if you want to sort of tell us a bit about, where you were at that point when you were that prop forward. Prop forward?
Yes,
did I get that right?
Prop forward. Yeah, I mean, as I say, looking back now, because I've done quite a bit of reflection recently, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing at all. I realised it was probably got into a chicken and an egg situation of, because I was a naturally bigger built person at that time, that was the position I took up when I started playing contact rugby. And the more I played that position, the more I probably then took on the characteristics that were expected of that person to be. The nature of the role, you do a lot of pushing in scrums, you lift people up. You've got to be a bigger person and got to be strong to do it. But equally, I then used that label to choose to make some of the life choices I did. And I would happily go out and drink 6-7 pints after a rugby match, because that's what props do.
Right.
I made food decisions, I could go out and eat what I wanted because I was a big person, and that was my role in the team, and that's what I did. And I did it very well, both being a prop and the food and drink side of things. And I think I used to justify it because my teammates would do the same. But at the time, I was playing rugby for both my club side and university. And yes, all my Sunday teammates were doing it on a Sunday, and all my Wednesday rugby teammates were doing it on a Wednesday, but I was doing it twice a week. I was drinking, 6, 7, 8 pints after every rugby match. And, well, food-wise, I'd have to have a big lunch before the match because I was going to play rugby, so I need the energy. And so then, 6, 7, 8 pints afterwards, plus food, plus probably then a takeaway on the way home because I had beer munchies afterwards. But all of that felt acceptable because that's what, that's the nature of the position I played. I was a big person, so that was fine. And probably complete denial of really how many calories a rugby match would burn off. That, looking back now, I cringe at some of the things I did and justified to myself because, the rugby match itself wouldn't have even burnt off the beer calories, let alone everything else I had.
Yeah. I mean, I know we've had conversations about, the eating decisions that you made in the past and things around your rugby, and I always like the lucky pasty story.
Oh yeah, because I wanted to have a cheese pasty every time before a match. I decided it was lucky to eat one, and again, I cringe saying it sometimes, and I look back and think, how could I have thought that? But in the moment, it seemed a reasonable thing to do. I mean, I'm not even really a superstitious person or anything like that. And you just think, yeah, it was a choice I wanted to make, and I made it easier to make by saying, well, it's acceptable to do that because I am the biggest person on the team, and that's my role. And it wasn't really.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you mentioned there how it was 2 days a week that you would be doing that on the Wednesday and then the weekend. How did that, you identifying as that person, affect the rest of the week? Like, did the rest of the week look similar, or maybe it's not the beers, but...
Yeah, but I think because on those days I ate badly and drank a lot, it became sort of, I would class myself as an addict to food.
Right.
And I think that just played out on the rest of the week as well. You know, I'd have something, I wouldn't be satisfied, and I'd have something else. And sometimes I'd eat stuff without even realising I'd done it. So I probably couldn't even sort of sit and say some of the things I used to do because I don't necessarily really remember doing it. I just, you know, from one meal to the next, as soon as I finished one thing, I'd be thinking about what I would have next.
Right.
And like exercise and sport would be a distraction from doing that. But yeah, you know, I've heard people say, oh, I can't stop eating, and others say, well, just stop, don't have it. But I get that sometimes. You don't even want it, but there's just something in you makes you want to eat something else.
Yeah.
And once you've eaten it, you're like, I didn't even enjoy that, but what can I have next?
Yeah. That's quite a strong one to, obviously, going off labels. Addict's quite a big label, and it covers a wide range of things that people can be addicted to. But I think an addiction to food, something that people don't necessarily think of very much, is it?
No, and I say it's probably not something I would have ever thought about at the time, and probably not something I would have even admitted to until fairly recently, of that actually that is part of my personality. And I think this time around, rather than trying to be somebody I'm not, I've accepted that about myself, and I've worked with it to be successful and not think I shouldn't have 3 meals and 3 snacks a day like I do. I need to do that to keep in control.
Yeah.
So I've worked out how to do it and not try to break who I am.
Yeah. So how have you worked with that then? Like, you know, where you're saying, you know, you are working with it now and you've accepted that is a part of who you are. At what point did you realise that you were identifying as that person and work with it to overcome the negative impacts of that?
I think probably initially was a few years ago, 'cause this is the 3rd time now in my life I've lost a significant amount of weight. It's the first time, as I say, I've actually stayed to where I've got to and actually get to a healthy weight to start with. As I say, I think probably 4 or 5 years ago when I've lost weight the last time, I started to understand myself more then and realise it was my relationship with food that was causing my weight problems, really. But again, I don't think I'd fully adapted to being me still. I worked with a personal trainer, and she probably gave me a more structured meal plan and ideas of what I should do. And I stuck to it because that's what she told me to do. But I never fully adapted it as a lifestyle.
Right.
And it's only this time that, as I say, now I've done it for a 3rd time, that I think, why did I keep going wrong? Why did I keep going back over? And it was because I was still trying to do things that just weren't natural to me. And again, I suppose it's labels. You think, oh, to be healthy and lose weight, I should eat salad, for example.
Right, yeah.
And I don't like salad. I've never liked salad. I don't enjoy salad. I don't look forward to having a salad. So I've not gone down that route this time.
Yeah.
I've looked at myself and what I do like and, you know, what foods satisfy me, and found ways to adapt them to fit what I needed to fit.
Yeah.
And not tried to go the other way and make things fit that I don't like or want.
I think that's a massive part of people's problems sometimes when they are trying to overcome a label. And I mean, obviously, we're talking specifically about, you know, being addicted to food and wanting to lose weight. They sort of set themselves up for failure in a sense, that they think that there's a label there, the healthy person. They eat salads, chicken, they eat rice, they eat veg, they eat fruit. They don't ever have chocolate, they don't ever have crisps, they don't drink, they're training 7 days a week, they're doing X, Y, and Z. And they sort of think that to be a healthy person, those are all the things that they need to put in place to be that. And then when they can't do a certain thing, they see themselves as a failure, so they go back to old habits. I don't like veg. I absolutely hate veg. I went through a phase when me and Ross got together of eating broccoli. And that mentally was because I thought it would impress Ross. PT, he's not going to want an unhealthy girlfriend, obviously now wife. So I had to demonstrate that I was a healthy person, and eating chicken and broccoli was me trying to prove that I was some sort of healthy person, which is completely backwards. He knows now that I just gag whenever broccoli comes near us, to be fair. But it's people will put these things in place because of a label that they see as being X, Y, and Z. But actually it's not about that. It's about what works for you on an individual level, which obviously now you've identified.
Yeah, and as I say, if somebody looked at my diet, I could still be better. I could eat more fresh fruit and veg than I do, but equally, I'm in such a much better place than I've ever been that, I'm happy with what I do. Yes, over time I'd still tweak things and make some changes, but I know now I've got a basic diet of stuff I like to eat.
Yeah.
That keeps me on track.
Yeah.
I can adjust around what I do. I can still have a life, but fundamentally I've got a set structure that I go back to time and time again, and it keeps me where I'm at. And I've never had that before, because I tried to do things that weren't natural.
So you're obviously in a much more positive place now from that.
Absolutely.
I suppose that's a good indication of the fact that actually, even though there's negative labels that we try to move away from, and we try to move closer to more positive labels, sometimes the positive labels can hold us back as well.
Yeah.
Which I've never actually considered until then. Because I suppose with some positive labels, you put it on a pedestal might be the wrong word, but you sort of see it as such a positive that you have to do all of these things to be that, and if you're not, then you're falling short. But actually, you are doing well.
Probably a couple of months ago, I had a bit of a moment because, people saying, oh, you're inspirational, you're a legend, you're amazing, you've done so well. And I had a bit of a spell where I was like, what if I can't live up to that? I've gone back over this, twice before I've let things slip. What if I can't be the person people now think I am? People look at me and like, oh, you must feel like a different person. And physically, yes, I am a massively different person to the person who walked in the door 2.5 years ago. But inside, I'm still exactly the same person. I make different choices now, and I've accepted myself and work with myself, but everything else about me still exactly the same as it was.
Well, that's the thing. It's more about you living up to who you are. It's not about other people and what other people say.
And as I say, it was just a brief spell. I was a bit like, wow, I don't see myself as that person, and others do. And like, what if I let them all down? But it's a ridiculous thing because you can't. But yeah, I was a bit like, in my eyes, all I did was come and follow the program I was told to follow. But the more I've talked to people recently, people are like, yeah, we all know how we should lose weight, but you've actually lived it and done it. And that's what the inspirational bit is. It's not, it's not a pressure on me actually when I sat back and thought about it. I've just shown what determination and work does achieve, and I chose to do it, and I made those changes. And if that does inspire other people and help other people, then I've got my head back around that.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that again now. But
Good.
As I say, there was a patch where I was just like, wow.
So maybe's a bit of imposter syndrome going on there.
Yeah, because as I say, to me, I'm still exactly the same person. All I've done is followed the rules and changed my thinking of what I was doing, because essentially I'd made the choices that made me put the weight back on in the first place, and now I've just changed my choices to lose it again. So, but I guess we're all generally our own harshest critics, and we don't see in ourselves what other people probably do see in us. So.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm one of the people other than the fact that you're my pen friend, because we got to know each other quite well through messaging each other through lockdowns and things like that. I've always called you a legend, because you are. I do think you're an absolute legend. But one of the things for me was how the reason why was because I feel like you've overcome a lot, and it hasn't just been, you know, the food side or addiction to food or anything like that. It's been more, you've sort of faced adversity, you know, with your health concerns and things like that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, are you happy to share that element of overcoming that? I mean, obviously, you can tell people what it actually is, because I haven't a clue how it works.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's another form of label as well. That I know we've discussed it, that healthcare professionals have probably now got the experience of being labelled both for being overweight and then, because I'm a normal weight, being treated differently. And yeah, I was diagnosed with a condition called idiopathic intracranial hypertension, or IIH as it's known for short. And it is very strongly linked with overweight females of childbearing age. Right. But equally, the term idiopathic means no known cause. So it's a contradiction in itself that they're saying there's no known cause, but most healthcare professionals blame weight for the condition. So obviously, when I was diagnosed, I was quite overweight at the time. And then over the years, I put on more weight. Effectively, the pressure and the fluid around my brain gets too high, so I've got a surgical shunt in place, which sits in my spine and drains into my abdomen. And when the pressure gets too high, it drains off some fluid. When it's not working, I get severe headaches. I was in danger of losing my eyesight at one point, which was why they put the shunt in the first place. And I had a lot of problems when they first put the shunt in. I had 5 operations in 6 years, which, again, impacted my health massively on 2 fronts. One, the actual surgery, and it worked for about 6 months, then would break, and I'd have to wait to see the surgeon, then get an appointment for surgery. So, you know, every 6 months I was essentially not really able to do much. But again, probably often jumped on the bandwagon of, oh, well, I don't feel well, I can't do anything, I'll just lie on the sofa and eat to make myself feel better. And then it was after one of the operations, I made a concerted effort to lose weight, and that's when I worked with the personal trainer, and you know, I got down to about 12 stone at the time, which was the lightest I'd ever been at that point in my adult life. And I didn't have any problems at all with my shunt for another 7 years. Wow. So I had a new lease of life as such. And then last year, I started to have problems again, which to me massively felt like it was my shunt causing the problems. And had I still been the weight I had been previously, that would have been the first place the healthcare professionals would have gone as well. But because I was now a normal weight, I was told it couldn't possibly be that, because I shouldn't still have the condition. So I was told I had migraines, and you know, spent a year trying medication that I knew wasn't going to work, because I knew it was my shunt causing the problems. And it was only when I was told the 3rd person that there was a lump near my shunt that they finally did investigate and realised that was the problem. And it fixed it. And since then, you know, I have felt like a new person. And I think I now finally feel the benefits of all the weight I have lost. Last year was, I survived rather than anything else. But equally, I made different choices then
Yeah.
still to. I didn't use it as an excuse to stop.
Yeah.
You know, some days it was hard.
Yeah.
And some days I don't know where I got the energy from
Yeah.
to keep going. But I did, and it made a massive difference.
Yeah. Because I remember I was getting frustrated, like crazy frustrated, getting these messages like, oh, well, they've put us on this tablet and they've put us on this tablet. And it's like, even from what you were saying, I'm not a medical expert, but I was thinking, that's got to be the shunt. It has to be.
Yeah.
From everything that you said. And I think that's where labels can be dangerous at times. Obviously, from a medical professional point of view, if they have in their heads that, you know, you can't have a certain illness because, or be suffering because you're not overweight, you look like a healthy person now, then they don't necessarily look in the areas where they should be looking to put you right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I call you a legend. Like, obviously, because in our line of work, we do see excuses. And if I was to ever give someone an excuse and say, yeah, do you know what it is? Just chill out.
Yeah.
Take it easy. Don't do too much. You know, having a headache every single day for that amount of time, still having to work. Still, you know, you were doing walking challenges as well, weren't you? Like, how many steps did you do?
Oh, a lot.
Far too many to remember. But you did, you literally, it was just you made that decision to, you know, you weren't going to let it win. You weren't going to let it control
I
you.
think I realised that I was only able to still do what I was doing because of the weight I'd lost. If I was still sort of the weight that I was when I joined you guys originally, I wouldn't have had the energy to do what I was still doing. It was only the fact that because I weighed less and I felt, other than the headache, in myself better than I had done, that I was able to continue to do those activities. And by then I'd realised that, you know, it had made a difference. You know, loads of people are like, oh, do you not feel so hard done to? You've lost all this weight and now you feel ill. And yes, I did a bit, but equally I realised that I would have still been in a much worse position had I not lost the weight.
Yeah.
You know, at the same time, my mum got diagnosed with breast cancer and was getting treated for that as well. So, you know, whilst I wasn't having a great time, it put into perspective that things could still be worse too. You know, there's other things people can get diagnosed with and other problems people have too, and you can't give in.
You can't. You have to say, this is why I call you a legend. It's a very appropriate label for you. If I was to label you anything, that is the most appropriate label because you've overcome so much that so many people would have let just take them off course and take over the life in a sense.
And I would have done in the past.
Yeah.
You know, if we'd met each other 20, 25 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting doing this podcast because I would have made all the excuses other people make. Oh, well, it's not my fault. I'm ill. I can't do anything about it. It's not my fault. I'm supposed to be big. I'm supposed to be a prop. And actually, there is always something you can do about it. You can blame other people. You can blame circumstance. But until you truly accept that your own problems yourself and how can you deal with yourself to make those changes, I think you're always going to fight a losing battle.
So, mate, coming back to, obviously, when you were diagnosed, IIH?
Yep.
I couldn't possibly remember the actual name of it. I mean, this is a massive assumption, but I'm assuming that you weren't able to do contact sport anymore.
Initially, I did, but once they put the shunt in, then I wasn't allowed, or they recommended I didn't play.
Yeah.
Certainly rugby anymore.
Yeah. So obviously, as the rugby element was a massive part of your identity, how did you overcome that? Like, did you feel like you'd had a part of who you were taken away from you unfairly, or did it sort of serve you quite well?
I think probably a bit of both. Initially, it was hard because rugby, as I say, was a massive part of my life. I played from a club side, I played for the university, I played for the North East of England at rugby. So I was pretty decent rugby player. But I think long term, it did help me break some of the cycle of sort of that label of being a rugby player. But equally, I was a goalkeeper at hockey that also have very similar stereotypes as a prop forward in rugby, because again, my size and stuff, I naturally migrated to that position in hockey. So again, if you lined up a hockey team, I'd probably dare bet 90% of the goalkeepers will be the biggest person on the team. And again, for a long time, I lived in denial with that as well, of like, oh, I've played a hockey match, I can do what I want. Where, particularly in hockey, some days putting my kit on was probably the most energy I burned, because if the ball didn't come near me, I could be standing in goal doing nothing for 70 minutes.
Right.
Like literally. Sometimes I sat on the backboard of my goal doing nothing, but in my head, because I wanted to justify what I was doing, I'd played hockey, so that's fine.
Yeah. Do you feel like the sporting choices that you made came off the back of you identifying as a larger person who should be in those kinds of positions, in those kind of teams, or was it the other way around?
Again, probably a bit of both. The more I lived up to the characteristics of the position I played, the more that was probably the only positions at the time I could play.
Right.
I guess I've always been relatively fit for the size I was, but you know, in the grand scheme of fitness, I probably wasn't. You know, I couldn't have gone for like a 5-mile run when I played rugby, because I just couldn't have done it. So yeah, I guess again you get stuck in a cycle of, I was playing that position because that's the size I was, and because I then wasn't tackling my weight issues, it was the only place I could play, because I wasn't physically fit enough, or you know, I couldn't have gone and played outfield at hockey because I wouldn't have been able to run around for the whole match. So yeah, it's an interesting one. That and I say it's now that I sit and reflect that, you know, I kind of always just lived up to what I wanted it to be, rather than what it could have been.
So obviously, since this year it certainly hasn't been a written off year, because you've gone through the recovery, you've had your shunt sorted out, and recently you've gone back to rugby. I know obviously you're heavily into your golf as well, which you can talk a little bit about. What position do you play in rugby now?
Now I've gone back, as I say, I'm not allowed to play contact rugby anyway, so we play touch rugby. And in some ways that's good, because there's not really defined positions in touch rugby.
Right.
Because you don't have scrums and line-outs like you would in sort of contact rugby. But equally, again, it highlighted massively how differently people look at you. When I turned up to rugby the first time, none of the girls there were people I'd played with previously.
Right.
So the very first night, they didn't even know I used to be a rugby player. So I turned up and trained with them. At the end of the session, they were like, "You've clearly played rugby before." I was like, "Well, yeah, I was the captain here for 10 years. So then they were like, "Oh, so have you always been like a scrum half?" Which, again, back to labels and stereotypes, the scrum half is naturally the smallest person on the rugby pitch. So I'd gone from being the persona of the biggest person on the pitch to suddenly people thought I was naturally would play in the backs, or as one of the smallest, like where one of the smallest people. And again, that made me sort of take a step back and think, yeah, actually, I've changed so much that. And again, I like that ethos that I can go and play rugby, touch rugby, I can run around with the girls, but I'm not labelled as anything. I'm just
You're just playing rugby.
I'm just playing touch rugby, and I can, because like, what position do you want to play? I was like, I'll play wherever you want me to play.
Yeah.
Oh, well, last night at training, they were like, "Oh, well, you're quite quick. You can go on the wing." I was like, at no point ever in my life before would somebody have said, "Oh, you're quite quick. Go on the wing." It just wouldn't have been a thing.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy how just the difference in the two labels. Obviously, you've walked in quite unsuspecting. Everyone's like, "Who's this coming in here?" Not aggressive in the slightest. You know, not a big person. So they've automatically sort of overlooked the fact that you've played quite high level in the past.
Yeah.
Crackers. So you're well into it now as well again, aren't you?
Yeah, it's definitely hooked me back in. But equally, you know, the knee problem I've had, which was one of the instigators for joining yourselves in the first place and wanting to lose the weight, I'm conscious, you know, that's not gone away. And
Yeah.
I've learned to be more sensible.
Yeah.
And again, accept I have got limits. And as much as sometimes I really want to push past them and still just do absolutely everything all of the time, that I actually have to look after myself as well.
Yeah.
And that I can't push myself too far to then sort of jeopardise being able to train and do other things. Because again, in the past, I'm absolutely not very good at saying no. And if anyone asked me to do anything, I'd do everything, even if it was detrimental to myself in the end.
Yeah.
I've learned to find the balance and do what I enjoy, but equally know when my body's just said, no, I need to stop now.
Yeah.
Like last week, I was desperately wanting to go to rugby training, but I'd played golf like 5 days out of 6, and I'd come to the gym. And when I left here, I was like, I'm physically tired, I'm just going to go home. And that was a harder decision to make than to just go and run around at rugby as well. But I knew I needed to do that, to look after myself, to do the right things on the days that followed.
Yeah. So you've overcome another label there as well, really. If you've always been a yes person, always saying yes to everything, you've managed to overcome that and think, actually, no, there's a line there. That's quite another positive breakthrough, really. Definitely.
Yeah. And again, thinking I had to exercise all of the time, otherwise I might go back in the wrong direction. I'm like, no, you don't, you know, there is a limit to what you can do and should do, and
Yeah.
you know, you can't go crazy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember when you started, you know, we had to adjust some of the programs for you. Doing the home workouts, you know, I'd see you sometimes doing the same sort of movements, and not necessarily what I was showing everyone to do, and it was because you were looking after your knee. And again, you were dealing with your shunt issue and your headaches and getting up and down off the floor and things like that, all things that would add to it. And you literally just, you know, you did what you needed to do rather than just sort of ploughing on and being stubborn about it.
Yeah, and again, in the past I'd have been stubborn and like, no, I need to do whatever I'm being told to do, regardless of what impact that then had on me later. Where I think sort of coming here and, as you say, you can adapt things. I realised you don't have to have limitations. You know, you can't always do exactly what you want to do, but then there is always something you can do.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, oh, I can't join a gym because I've got a sore knee. I can't do whatever because of whatever reason. But
Yeah.
if you truly want to do something, you can find a way to do it.
Yeah.
You just have to want to do it.
I feel like from having this conversation with you, I've had a little bit of a thought process while you've been talking. I feel like labels are quite extreme. There always seems to be extremities of labels. You're either all or you're nothing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to be a healthy person, you have to eat the salad, you have to do this, you have to do 1,000,001 steps. You have to do 7 gym sessions a week. You have to do everything. Or you go back to the prior label, whether it was overweight or, you know, food addict, you know, whatever side it was, and you kind of go all in on that side again, like, well, I don't feel well, I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to do anything because I'm ill.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to eat that because I can, because I'm destined to be big. I'm supposed to be big. I'm going to continue down that. There's no... I think initially when people look at labels and when people start to live by labels, they live to the extremes of them.
Yeah.
There's never sort of a happy medium between anything. It's all or nothing.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I would, yeah. I'd say right now, I would struggle to say what label I would give myself. You know, for the first time, I don't feel I'm trying to be anything other than just who I am.
That's such a breath of fresh air, though, because that's the whole point. Like, when I first started talking with Ross about labels, it was about, actually, we live our lives by all these different labels. At what point do you start thinking, well, no, I'm going to live life for me, like just being me? It doesn't matter what me actually is in terms of a label that other people can then relate to, as long as I am me and I'm true to myself. Then people will either, like it or they won't like it. And yeah, it's about finding peace in yourself and not living by these labels and stereotypes that other people put on you.
As I say, I know people will see me and label me in various ways, probably. Like
Legend.
Like legend. Like, I was chatting to one of the new starters last week, and I was saying I played golf and this, that and the other, and she's like, oh, you're so athletic. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but again, just reflecting about what we would maybe talk about today, I was like, that isn't a word somebody probably would have used to describe me at any other point in my life.
Right. Even though you did do a lot of different
because
sporting
physically
roles.
I didn't look like what somebody probably perceived an athletic person to look like.
Right.
I was, at one point in my life I played 3 sports. I played rugby, hockey and cricket. As I played rugby for the northeast of England, I played cricket for the county, but I still was what everyone would deem as overweight. So anybody who I spoke to and I said I did all these things probably was like, yeah, but like, really, what do you do? Where now if I tell people the same story, they use different words.
Right.
So when I play a lot of golf. I'm the lady captain of my golf club at the minute. So when we play team matches, we go out and play against a person from another club. 99% of the time, it's not someone I've ever met before. So we spend, 3 hours together out on the golf course, and we chat about all sorts of stuff. And when we talk, and we always say, oh, have you played any other sports and stuff? I've even noticed sort of in the last 3 years how differently they respond when I say, oh, I used to be a rugby player, hockey player, cricket player. In the past, they were always a bit like, oh, right. Where now it's like, oh, yeah, you can, almost like you can tell you used to do all these things where, again, I haven't changed. I'm still exactly the same person.
Yeah.
But they now perceive probably what level I played those sports at by what I look like now.
It's mad because that just goes to show how much labels actually come from what you see of a person, sort of like a believability factor. Like if you look at someone and if you can look at someone and say, well, you look athletic, or or you don't look the part. Sort of there's a lesser level of believability there, which is absolutely crazy. I mean, that kind of goes back to the whole medical professional, where they make decisions based on somebody. Obviously, at the outset, they've made the decision, they've looked into it all, and you've had this IIH because you've been overweight. But then it couldn't possibly have been your shunt being the issue because you were a normal weight.
Yeah.
Normal weight.
Yeah.
And it's all just what someone's physically seen of you. They've made that decision without looking into anything. They didn't even look at your shunt initially, did they?
No.
They looked at everything, but
they did a lumbar puncture and things, and the pressure at the time wasn't deemed medically high, but the type of shunt I've got, not many people can live with. I've got what the class is a free-flowing LP shunt, so it probably has my natural pressure lower than a normal person now would have. So what's high for me might not actually be classed as clinically high, but my body couldn't deal with the pressure I had. So, I completely can see on paper why it made no sense.
Yeah.
And I was cautious at the start because I was a bit like, well, by everything everyone says about weight and stuff, it shouldn't be my shunt. I shouldn't still have the condition.
Yeah.
But when I got discharged by the headache specialist, he said it's highly, highly unusual for someone to have lost the amount of weight you have and still need your shunt, but
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
And that he would learn from that.
Well, it's good that he said that he would learn from
Yeah.
that, because it just goes to show that you can always learn from things, and you can't just put a label on it and assume.
Yeah.
Especially, I think that's quite a dangerous position to be in, really, if you are a medical professional and you're making decisions on someone's health based on what they look like. I know my mum had a form of bowel cancer, and her GP fobbed her off. She did get an apology in the end, but they fobbed her off as it was nothing. You know, she was of normal weight, she looked after herself, she ate relatively well, couldn't possibly have been anything untoward, and obviously it ended up being bowel cancer, which she's clear of, she's overcome that. But it could have been a totally different story. It could have been a completely different story, because it was, by the time she got the treatment, it was stage 4.
Yeah.
Which is obviously the point at where most people start thinking, well, there's a high likelihood I'm not going to come out of this.
Yeah.
And if it had been a different story, it could have been caught a hell of a lot earlier, and potentially not been as big of a deal, because obviously it always is.
Yeah.
But it could have been a more straightforward process to get her the treatment and get her sorted from that. But yeah, just from literally a physical perception of someone, oh, you're fine. And then it's how many other labels come out in that kind of environment. Say someone's been going to the doctors for various different ailments that they've had over the years, and sort of the doctors decided that person's a hypochondriac. And then they get something actually that's quite severe.
Yeah.
How often does that happen? How often does that happen where a person gets totally fobbed off as nothing?
Probably quite a lot.
It's scary though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. Definitely. Maybe there's some medical professionals who might listen to this and think, oh, I might need to check myself every now and again and actually do some proper checks before I fob someone off. I'm not saying that they all do it, of course. I mean, they must have to deal with quite a lot on a day-to-day basis, but
Yeah.
I suppose that's where human error comes into it, doesn't it? And judgment. If a lot of things come down to human judgment, and if we're whacking labels on everything left, right, and centre, we stand to make some quite big mistakes. I mean, I touched on it with I had Tom on last week, and even just the relationship I have with Tom now could have been totally different if I'd gone off the back of what I originally had him labelled as, which was Posh Tom. But Posh Tom wouldn't want to talk to me, like he's up there and I'm down here. It's not going to work. No conversations. But like the relationships that you have with people are formed off the back of a label, and it's just purely judgment and stereotypes a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Mad. So I'm going to ask you one last question. If you were to eradicate completely off the face of the earth a label that either you use or other people use, what label would you like to see gone, and why?
I don't know if it's a label, but I think it's just the perception that bigger people are not fit and healthy, because that's not true. But equally, that people would then stop using that as a way to justify their being. If you know what I mean. I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but you know, I've realised looking back over the years, the only limit there's ever been on what I look like physically is ones I've imposed on myself.
Right.
My food choices are the reason I was overweight. I said the food addiction. And I always perceived I could only be a certain kind of person. I could, you know, even when I lost weight down to 12 stone, I decided that was the smallest I could ever be. Mm-hmm. I'm now 2.5 stone less than that again. So that was clearly rubbish. Mm-hmm. But again, because the label of being overweight or unhealthy was there, you could still use it. Mm-hmm. Where I don't think using weight as a way to determine something, and I think getting rid of a label of what weight has to do with what a person can and can't do. It's not exactly a label, but that perception that your size is the limiting factor, I think that's an important thing to break down.
100%, 100%. It's kind of like a limiting belief in yourself in one sense, but then it's the perception of others as well, if that person can't be that because they are overweight.
Yeah, where you can actually be whatever you want to be if you're prepared to make the decisions.
To support who you want to be.
To change, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat today. Nikki, thank you very much for joining me. Yeah, just keep being a legend. You can keep that label. I'm going to make you keep that label. I'm going to remind you of it all the time.
I've got my head around it now, so
Good.
That's good.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.